Welcome back to another episode of Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services, Cottonwood Parks and Recreation, and Gettles High Desert Mechanical. I'm your host, Philip Katafamo. We have got a great show in store for you this week. Later in the program, we'll be joined by Mingus Union girls basketball coach Paul Ventura to break down the offseason, talk about the team's first game of the season, and how he identifies leaders on his team. We'll then be joined by Mingus Union cross-country coach Sierra Tibbs. She'll speak about how the team did at state, what she learned in her first year coaching the program, and what the plan is for the offseason. But on the other side of this break, we'll be joined by Prescott girls soccer coach Paul Campuzano to talk about the start of the season, goals he has for the program, and discuss the team's first game on December 2nd. All of that and a whole lot more coming up right here on Off the Bench. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical, heating, air conditioning, and plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle. Get Gettles.
Two things we can count on every year:
a new set of tax rules and great weather here in Northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I am joined now by a familiar face of the program. He is Prescott High School girls soccer coach Paul Campuzano. Coach, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Phil, how are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing good, sir. It's always good to have you. The Badgers finished a very annoying 2020 season with a fantastic record, 11-0 overall last season, which included a trip to the championship game. Coach, I just wanted to ask you if you could take us through that championship game against South Point Catholic.
Well, unfortunately, the past 4 years in state, we faced South Point. And the first year we played them, they were obviously the better team. The very next year we played them again, and it was a closer score, 1-0. So I felt us getting closer. Having the girls go through playing a team of that quality and seeing that, hey, it's a big deal, but they're not unbeatable was really important for us. So going to that game last year, we were confident. We were playing well. We hadn't lost a conference game for the second straight year. So we were really confident, playing well. And going into it, I was confident that we could at least stay close, unlike in the past where they've gotten a couple goal leads. So everyone had the right mindset. No one was nervous, thinking that we couldn't do it. We felt we were a comparable team, an equal team. And I think we showed it for good stretches of that game. They have some really dynamic girls, and they showed it early on, which really had our focus there. It's interesting. After the game, people commented on stretches of the game that they liked that I didn't. And so you always wonder, am I a little too close to the situation to give a proper analysis? Am I saying we were better than we were when we weren't playing well? So it was nice to hear other people say there were two or three good opportunities in the first half. Had we scored the first goal, obviously that changes the game in soccer pretty quickly. So, and then that didn't happen. And they got a goal that was in the second half. They got a goal that you kind of was a bit unlucky, but a quality finish on their part. And then from there, we were sort of chasing the game and, gave a good effort. Was complimented by their coach, who's a fabulous coach at the end. She was shocked at how we would keep coming and coming and coming, but, wave after wave. But, when you play a team like that, there's very little margin for error, and ended up losing that game.
Well, Coach, it is an unfortunate finish, but the regular season, 11-0 on the regular season, you guys obviously swept through the playoffs, minus of course the championship game. So I feel It's still a very successful season. I know you feel the same way. I know it didn't necessarily end the way you wanted it to, but what an incredible opportunity and a feat for your team to accomplish an undefeated regular season and a trip to the playoffs as well. It's very hard to keep that streak going. You graduated 5 seniors this past year as well. What can you say to their contributions, and what can you say about that senior class in general?
It was interesting because the year leading into the season, we had graduated 10 seniors, and it's that sort of interesting time where you're either rebuilding or those 10 seniors have laid the groundwork for them to be able to then continue and have the season they had. So it was nice to have those 5 there to sort of keep watch over would they be juniors, and keep them in line and let them know, hey, there's a reason we're here. Even though we lost those players, you guys were all ready to play. And it showed, and it's always tricky keeping the right number of people. We can keep up to 24, but is that smart? Is that not? And the 5 seniors we had were so good at keeping everyone level-headed, letting them know, hey, we've been here before. We just need to play our game. And keeping them honest in practice is the big thing. Because when you have a team that's, I guess, a quality team and playing well, there can be moments where they want to relax and they want to, not do the fitness test on a Monday or whatever scenario it is and beg me to do something else. And so it's the seniors who will step up and go, no, we have to do this. It's for what comes later in the season. So they were a great group. And it's always good to have seniors who are involved and not just seniors who are there to play. So they were great kids.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about those contributions because when you look at the stat sheet, I mean, obviously your top 2 scorers, which we'll talk about, they're coming back this year, were juniors. But it seemed like when your senior class, like you mentioned, just kind of contributed in other ways, especially when it came to more on the field.
Yeah, no, they the biggest part when I came in 4 years ago was to sort of create more of a culture and include the JV in that process. So there wasn't this division between, I play JV, so it doesn't matter who the coach is at varsity. So that was our biggest change. And it's now a program where I'm present at their practices. We practice together. I don't make them go to the far fields to practice. They practice right next to us. They hear me. And the seniors that graduated weren't putting up big stats, but they were doing a lot of the hard work on defense and a lot of the dirty work in the midfield. And really being level-headed and keeping the younger ones from getting too nervous or too excited or getting too wound up when a team would come at us. So it was a nice balance to have them for sure.
Well, speaking about this season, of course, the off season is officially not necessarily done, but getting close to the end. The Badgers will have their first game on December 2nd. So right now it's all preparation for the start of the season. But Coach, how did the off season go? Was the program able to welcome in some new faces? Any new freshmen? How did the off season look?
Good news, bad news. I want to complain, but I really can't because we haven't had an injury in 2 years. And this year, 4 girls, and then unfortunately they were all defenders, have hurt their knees in one way or another. So I don't know what level they'll be playing. One had surgery. One wants to wait. And so we've had 4 significant injuries at the club level leading into the high school season. So I'm down to 2 defenders. So I'll figure out somewhere to get 2 more, 3 more maybe, and hopefully the others will heal. But other than that, it's been great. There's a massive freshman class that came in. And for the first time in 2 years, I took 4 freshmen on the varsity team, 1 out of necessity and 3 that are ready to play. And then we have another big class coming in next year another big freshman class coming in next year. So we'll be fine. It's just you hope, not even for the sake of soccer, but for the sake of these kids later in life, not to have ACLs and have surgery. And then they want to get back and play. And I'm like, you really should worry about, 5 years from now, are you walking funny or do you have pain in your knee? So kind of discouraging them from playing, but it's hard to tell a senior and one of them was Malia Hoyt, who started as a freshman, has played every game of her life that she's wanted to. She's that good, and she'll miss her senior year probably this year. So I'm sad for her on that level, but I'm also telling her not to hurry or think she's going to play this year because soccer ends here. She's going on to, maybe she'll play intramurals in college, or maybe she'll want to run with her kids and not have to hobble. So
Right.
you got to keep that in perspective. And I would love to have her. And I just feel bad for her on a personal level for the 3 years she's given us. So.
Well, I mean, like you said, Coach, you don't want to cause lingering issues down the line just because of and not to take any importance away from playing soccer, especially in your senior year. But I mean, like you said, it ends here. I mean, after this season, your players are either going to go play at the collegiate level or they're not, or they'll do, intramurals, or they'll do it with their kids, So I think that's a great mindset to have when it comes to just looking at that long term. But, you talk about wanting to build a culture, Coach, welcoming in a nice big freshman class this year. And then next year, welcoming in another good freshman class. You've already got a few freshmen, you said, of course, one out of necessity, but the other 3 are already ready for you at the varsity level. Just looking at the returners you've got, I mean, obviously you return your top 2 scorers in Carrie Kassoon and Nicole Race, but you bring back Riley Pekovic and Ellie Magnet. That's kind of your big seniors. Of course, there's still others on the roster, but man, Coach, adding not only those returners, but also a fresh crop of freshmen who are already ready at the varsity level. I mean, that's got to be great for you going forward, especially with the plans you have for the program.
Yeah, no, I think I don't know what it was about those birth years, the 2007 birth year, 2008 birth year, but there are a lot of athletes and females who played soccer, which is strange. It's dropped off after that, but yeah, it's nice to know that they're getting a lot of good work at the club level. So when I get them, they're ready to go. Yeah, no, it's exciting. You always have to wonder, it makes it real competitive making varsity. It used to be, and it's not an easier thing, but it was a thing where you can make varsity. But now, I mean, you could be in your sophomore year and maybe not make it because I don't need a defender because I have so many. So it's become a real competitive thing, and they all understand that, which is nice. So they're ready to go. They're ready to play. And I think a lot of it's mindset. Physically you can have a great athlete, but if their soccer IQ is not there, then it's going to take them a bit longer to get on the varsity team.
Again, we were speaking with Prescott High School girls soccer coach Paul Campuzano. The Badgers are getting ready for their first game on December 2nd. They'll be taking on Saguaro. We'll talk to Coach about that in just a little bit. Coach, coming into this season, what goals do you have for the program? Where would you like to see your seniors develop at? Where would you like to get with this new crop of players? Just what goals do you have in general for the team this year?
I think it's just keeping that feeling of community, or that feeling of sisterhood, or whatever, however they do it together. We have another, and it's not as big as the class 2 years ago where we had 10 graduating. I think it's 7 now. But it's 7 starters, for 3 years. These girls are absolute beasts, and they make me so proud every time I watch them out there. They're wonderful kids. This year they took it upon themselves, after I had our senior meeting, to assign themselves to these younger kids, to get them, acclimated at school, to make sure they're turning in the correct paperwork, or they got the right uniforms, and how we do things at practice, both in the classroom and outside, and then when we take these bus trips. So they, it's just that they took what the group 2 years ago has done, and they've grown with it, and they've made it even more inclusive with everyone. Yeah. And so it's just been really neat to see that. That's all I hope for them, is that they get, and I don't like when you hear a lot of the soccer analysis say, well, they deserved a win, or they deserved better. I try not to think in those terms, but it's going to be exciting this year. I think it will end up in the same spot come the end of the season, playing that last game. And then hopefully, they've learned something from last year, and they can get over the top in that game.
Well, speaking of that final game of the season, I mean, you do take on Flagstaff for the final game of the year, a team that you guys battled tough against in the playoffs, a 2-1 overtime victory for Prescott. I was going to save this question for a little later, but Coach, what can you say kind of about the region? This is like you mentioned, you come in 4 years ago. You've seen these teams multiple times now. You're familiar with the programs. Maybe a couple head coaches have changed, but pretty much these programs have stayed the same. What can you say about the talent within the region? What can you say about your opposition in the region? And where do you feel Prescott sits right now in the region?
Well, I think that's the interesting thing. It was 2 years ago. I think 5 teams went deep into was it 2 years ago? Yeah. And then Mingus was even in the semifinals or a quarterfinal. A lot of these teams don't show well outside of the region, but within the region, the those are the games those are those trap games where we have to go to Lee Williams this year in Kingman. And they were great last year. They're one of the only teams that scored on us, and you can see them coming up. You can see them getting better. And I have a great relationship with their coach. So he warned me as a joke, and they actually did a wonderful job at the end. We were able to sort of pull away. But I think it's just our depth that gives us that little advantage over a lot of these teams. I mean, Bradshaw, it was the same when I was growing up. Anytime you play a crosstown rival, you don't know what will happen. You hope, it goes how on paper, but, and I think that's one of our advantages here that we finally caught up with Flagstaff these last 2 years, is that our depth is just as deep as theirs finally. And so we can have an injury or two and then put up a player that's ready to play and ready to go. So I think that's where we've caught them. I don't see us losing a region game this year. And I don't like to say that, but I think I have the right group where if they hear this, they'll know what I'm trying to say. It's not disrespectful to any of the other schools. I just think what we've done these last 2 years with the same thing, winning the region, I think, we're ready to go again. And it's unfortunately, we're at that point where if we don't make another long run in state, then I need to reevaluate myself, not the girls, because they're ready to go. It's just, can I get them there?
Well, Coach, kind of looking again back at your team this season, you welcome back now senior Charlotte Osborne. She'll be back in the net for you as your goalie. How has she been developing inside the net since she's taken over that starting spot? She came in, I think I took 3 goalkeepers 2 years ago, and she was, in my mind, preseason the starter. And then a senior really stepped up and was amazing, sort of out of the blue. And so she had to, sit there for a year behind this girl, wondering what just happened to my sophomore year. And then came in last year ready to go. She does a lot of training offsite. She does a lot of training down in the valley with different things. So she wants it. She really wants what's next. She wants to play next year as a freshman somewhere. And so when you see that desire and that effort, that, and she's the first one to come to me and go, hey, we got scored on yesterday. What happened? And then we'll talk our way through it. And I'll say, here's what I saw. Here's what you saw. We'll watch video. So she's really, really, really been working hard for these past 3 years and has put a lot of effort in it, because that is a lot different position than anything else in soccer. So it's a lot more technical. And it's there's moments of action. And if she shuts off for a minute and she's not helping the defense, even when she's not receiving a ball, then it can get real tricky for a team. But she's been one of the reasons we've had shutouts, one of the reasons teams don't score on us, because she's able to help the defense before it gets to her. So a real good kid, real smart kid. And it's nice to see her improving every year, because sometimes there's a plateau in that junior year with a lot of kids, and then they pick it back up in the senior year and it's a little too late. But she's been improving every year. So it's been great. Well, it's fantastic to hear, Coach. And it's great to hear that a lot of these girls are coming to you with, sort of wanting to improve. You just talked about it. Charlotte, after a game, will come to you, go, hey, Coach, what did I do wrong? Where can I improve? What can I do differently? And I think that just shows so much about her character and a lot of the willingness to learn. And I know that it's not just Charlotte who does. I'm sure you got a bunch of other players do the same thing. But, it's great to see that these kids not only, even though their time at Prescott is very short, they really, really want to get the most out of it. And there's a reason why you guys were undefeated in the regular season last year. And it's because of stuff like that.
Can I make a comment?
Of course.
I think there's the big, especially with soccer, and I don't know if this is I've heard it with hockey as well and some of the other baseball, but there's a big competition between players who play at the club and then go to the high school, and they feel like there's a big drop off when they come to the high school. And luckily I haven't seen that, or they don't take it as seriously on the club level. No, I coach at both. So I see, I coach with Phoenix Rising, and I've had coaches say that to me. They don't know I coach the high school. So, and then in my head, I finally figured out what it is. It's sort of like professional soccer, where you play for your club to make the money, even though they don't make money. But you play for the high school is like playing for your country. And I think that's where these girls, they want to come play high school. They want to be there. They love it. It's a whole different pressure and feeling than at the club level. And so that's what's nice. I think that is sort of, I didn't realize it till this summer when I was thinking about it. That's what it is. They're coming home to play for their country, sort of. And that's why they give everything to me and to the school. So it's great.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy, Coach. And that's right on. That's exactly what it is. They go and do the club for a little bit. They play with other friends who don't necessarily go to Prescott, and then they go back to Prescott, and they all come back together and try to put together a championship run at not necessarily a World Cup, but a 4A title. It's pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. Again, we were speaking with Prescott High School girls soccer coach Paul Campuzano. Coach, before we let you go, like I mentioned, you guys face Saguaro, first game of the season on December 2nd. I know we're a little ways away from that, but what are you expecting from the SaberCats in that game, and how excited are you to get the season started?
Oh, we're ready. Very excited. We played them 2 years ago down in the Valley. A real fast team. They were young at the time, so now I think they're going to be a lot tougher test. So they have if she's still playing, I haven't checked rosters, but she was one of the fastest track kids in the state, and she was the same way on the field. So we had a couple of girls who were fast going, she ran by me a couple of times. So, they're always tough. Fortunately for us, they have to come up here, and with that field that we have, it's so perfect and so wonderful, and we know how to play on it. So we should be ready to go. Like I said, I'm not going to watch video on teams early in the season. I want us to express ourselves and do what we do and not worry about, we'll know about her, but we won't plan for her. We'll do what we do. We'll get through. And if we're doing that, we'll be fine. But yeah, no, they were a good team, solid team 2 years ago, but everything changes. So we'll see.
Yeah, it is a different team, but a new year here. In the 4A soccer, and that made no sense. But Coach Campuzano, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. Best of luck on the season. Best of luck on December 2nd again. You're taking on Saguaro at Bill Shepherd Field. Hey, you're right. It is a gorgeous field. We've been there a couple times broadcasting some games. And Coach, again, best of luck on the season. Thank you again for your time.
No, I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Mingus Union High School girls basketball coach Paul Ventura right here on Off the Bench. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle. Get Gettles.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Rice Accounting and Jackson Hewitt Tax Services and Gettle's High Desert Mechanical. I am joined now by a very familiar face of the program. He is Mingus Union High School girls basketball coach Paul Ventura. Coach Ventura, welcome back onto the show.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Well, we're always happy to have you, Coach. The basketball season is just getting actually closer and closer to starting. Their first game, the Marauders, are taking on Yunker on November 30th. We'll talk about that at the end of the interview. But, Coach, I want to take a step back here and kind of look at the growth of the program over the past 3 years. I know you've been coaching there for a little bit longer than 3 years, but, in 2018, you guys went 2-16, 2019, 0-18, 2020, you guys bounced back with 4 wins, 4-10 record in 2020. Coming here into 2021, Coach, I mean, what goals do you have for the program? Where would you like to see this team improve in this year?
Well, obviously the goal is always to get a little better in the win-loss column, but it's not the be-all, end-all for us. It's a bigger picture thing for the kids, making sure that we are producing good citizens into the community and helping have some kind of effect on the kids as they're moving on. But, obviously the 2 hours that we're in the gym, we're doing some basketball work, and we want to make sure we get better with that. Every year the goal is to win more games. I think last year's record didn't really reflect how good we were. Not having a real off season hurt us. Had a couple kids quarantined for extended periods of time, which kind of hurt us. and we didn't really turn it on until the second part of the season. And I think if we had played that way at the beginning of the season, it's more like a 7-8 win season, maybe even a little bit better. But this year, I see us being far better than that record wise. We we have returning players that understand what's necessary, and we have some young players that appear to buy in and understand what's necessary to go forward. And we haven't really talked we haven't used the word win a lot, I would say. We've talked a lot about improving, controlling what they can control, which is their effort and their attitude on a daily basis. And if those things get controlled, their skill level will get better and they'll win basketball games. But yeah, we haven't really even used the word win yet. It's been good. And I think in years past, that's something that I've been guilty of for sure. And the players, where we start talking about wins and losses a little early instead of down the road when it needs to be talked about.
There's only a few instances, Coach, where I can kind of speak personally about some of the programs that I cover on the show, and one of which is your program. I have gotten a chance to call Mingus girls basketball games for the past 2 years, and I do agree. I genuinely think that this team last year very much better than the record they show, 4-10. You talk about obviously all the issues outside that we all had to deal with, the pandemic. We were right in the midst of it as the winter season was starting. The players were playing with masks, and at the end of the year, they didn't have to play with masks, like you mentioned, the quarantine issue. But I agree wholeheartedly. I do very much feel that this Mingus basketball team we saw in 2020 was a lot better than a 4-10 record that they did show. And honestly, that goes for a few other programs that I've also not only just for the Marauder programs I've covered, but also the programs outside of Mingus. When they come in and they play against the Marauders, you get a chance to kind of see a bit more of the region. But I agree, Coach. I think they were better than what the record showed. Moving on now, we're here in 2021, Coach. It is a new year. The offseason is pretty much done. I'm sure you've got your roster pretty much figured out at this point, minus maybe a couple names here and there. But, Coach, how did the offseason go? How many new faces did the program welcome in? How did tryouts go? Just what was the focus this offseason? Where are we just looking in general about the offseason?
Yeah, the offseason's about getting better, individually for sure. Some individual skill work, because once you get in the season, you try to do as much as you can when it comes to that, but ultimately it becomes a lot about how is the team going to perform. So you really focus on that leading into it, and some girls did a very good job with that. They were diligent. They've gotten much better. They improved some skill areas that they needed to improve. I would say, our team rosters are fairly set now. Probably just like I would say 3 or 4 that I'm not exactly sure where they're going to be yet. We have a scrimmage this Friday, and that will kind of tell me a little bit more once we're actually playing against someone. We have some returners that have been really dedicated, and I think that will help us out a little bit. Even if one of those kids ends up not necessarily playing a ton of minutes for whatever reason, because they've been around, they're going to be that positive person off the bench and on the bench if they're not in the game, kind of keeping people together. We're doing things a little differently this year too, and we're super young. And I think I felt like I've said that the last couple of years, but we're super young, and I think part of that is because when you attempt, and this is such a bad buzzword, but when you attempt to change culture, which is what me and my staff have tried to do over the last few years, when you do that, you're going to weed some people out. And sometimes they're really talented. Sometimes kids are, don't even go into it because they think that's going to be really difficult. He's a tough coach, or it's a difficult program because of all the rules. And however, in my mind, it ends up being a little bit better in the long run because of that. And so that culture change definitely scares off some kids. We probably had, I would say we had 10 more freshmen during the offseason than actually even showed up to tryouts. And I don't know if they got scared off as tryouts got close or what, but we still ended up with a ton of freshmen. And so our freshman sophomore team is pretty much all freshmen with the exception of one.
Okay.
And then our JV team is pretty much all freshmen with the exception of maybe one. And so we have one sophomore on the freshman sophomore team, and I think we'll probably have one sophomore on the JV team, and the rest are freshmen. But the good part of it is I've pushed them hard, and they have responded. And I'm not treating them like freshmen. They're getting treated just like the seniors who've been there for 4 years. They understand that there is a level of expectation, and I think they're ready to meet it. And they've got skill. So I knew the skill part was already there. And, it was more about honing the other stuff and really pushing them to be mentally tough. And they're responding really well. I have to say I'm pretty pleased.
Well, I mean, that's great to hear, Coach. The fact that your program's been welcoming in a nice crop of freshmen. You're going to have a freshman sophomore team, and you're going to have your JV team consisting mostly of underclassmen, which means, they'll be all 4 years there with you, Coach Hoke, and the rest of your staff as well. That's great going forward. You and I've talked about, obviously 2020 was a little tough with numbers just because of the pandemic, but I know you and a lot of other programs that I've gotten a chance to speak to have seen this nice influx of just kids wanting to go compete, wanting to go and play sports. And yeah, of course, not everybody will be there for the whole 4 years. Some kids will transfer, some kids won't play. It's all good. It happens, but it's just great to see that there are just more kids who are starting to make their way back into playing sports. And I know you're tickled pink to have a bunch of freshmen on your freshman and sophomore and your JV team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see them. And like I said, for the most part, they're out there just working super hard. A couple of kids who've really never even played basketball before, but they started to come a little bit before tryouts. So it really helped them getting into the flow of things, and they've improved like astronomically from where they were in, July, August to where they're going to be in January. Is going to be like a completely different kid. And so it's been good. It's been good to see.
You talk about some of those returners getting back, obviously one of which is Taylor Brock. We saw Taylor kind of really grow up throughout her sophomore year as the number 2 to Chase Dirksen. Obviously, Dirksen graduates, and now you've got Taylor Brock kind of manning that 4-5 position. She averaged 8 points a game last year. She was your number 2 scorer. Coming into this season, Coach, where's the focus been with her this offseason?
Taylor's always been really physically gifted. She's athletic. She's strong. She can jump really well, which is rare a lot for girls. They don't usually get off their feet too well. She can. And so for her, it's always been a skill set where coming into high school, she really didn't have any. And we were really working on, some basic things. This summer, we've worked on a couple more things, but truthfully for her, she's got 2 moves and a counter to each move. And there's literally no one that's going to be able to stop her one-on-one. I don't believe there's a person we're going to play that physically can handle Taylor by themselves. Okay. They're going to have to double team her. And we know that. And so she's worked a lot on passing because she knows the ball is going to have to come out of her hands. And she's kind of integral in our defense too. What we do defensively, she's going to be really, really important to us. And I think she's a kid that can play 30 minutes. She has a motor. And so I think she can really give us a ton of minutes, barring any foul issues, which is also another thing we talked about all offseason, that you're only good if you're on the floor. And if you're not on the floor because you have foul issues, then that's a problem. So she knows that going into the season, and she's improved her shooting. She knows she's going to be at the foul line quite a bit, so that's been a focus. She can hit threes. We just don't need her to take them in the games. And but she's very good from 15, 16 feet all the way into the backboard. And we want as many in that paint area as we could possibly get. And I think she's going to have a huge jump this year. Huge jump.
Well, we're definitely excited to see it, Coach. Like I mentioned, she's kind of taken over that leading scorer spot that Chase Dirksen left. And it's nice to see that Taylor's starting to expand her game a little bit more. You're right. Foul trouble was definitely an issue for her last season. But it's nice to see she's added a little bit more of a mid-range game to her game. And like you said, a little bit more ball handling, because she's 500% going to be double teamed a lot this season because of how tall and athletic she is. But it will be fun to watch Taylor Brock play. Another player who I know you're excited to get back, somebody who's really, you mentioned it early on regarding just kind of building that culture and people finding their roles. Mariana Lopez started out as a starter for you and then just kind of bounced around a little bit. She was with the first unit, then she'd be with the second unit. But it seemed like every time she was on the floor, she did a great job of just being that field general, of just being somebody who knows how to run the offense, can run the offense with efficiency, who can play really solid man defense. I mean, she's really stepped up as a leader. You and I got a chance to talk a little bit off camera about Mariana and the team earlier this summer. I just want to ask a little bit, how has she developed not only as a player, but also as a leader on this team as she comes into her final year at Mingus?
Yeah, I think for Mariana, it's up here. It's between the ears. If she can really utilize that mental toughness when she's on the floor, she'll have a really good year. We've talked a lot about where her strengths lie and where she has improvement areas, and to focus on those strengths during the game time and work on those improvements during practice. If we need a bucket, we don't necessarily want her taking a shot that's not her best shot. We want her to take the shot that she knows she's going to make. Right. And so really focusing on that for her, I think is key. The thing with Mariana is she knows where everybody's supposed to be on the floor at all times. And that's a great thing to have for someone who's your primary ball handler. And then I would say as well for her is she's been around me now for 4 years. And so she really understands what my focus is. She understands what I want. And I think she is totally bought into it. And she understands, the fact that as a senior and someone who's been around for 4 years, she has to be a leader. And sometimes it's going to be with her mouth and how she speaks but then there's going to be a lot of times it has to be with her actions, and let the other kids know that she's willing to do whatever it takes. So they should also be willing to do whatever it takes. And she knows there's no free rides. Yeah. And that, I think she learned that last year with what you're saying. The fact that she, was a starter, came off the bench, went back to being a starter, sometimes was with the first team. Sometimes she got back on the bench really fast, depending on, what was happening. She doesn't want that to happen. She wants it to be steady and consistent. Yeah. And she wants to have a really good senior year. And I think that will happen if she goes out and she plays her game. If she focuses and realizes what needs to be done, she'll have a really good season.
I do want to diverge a little bit, Coach. This question popped up in my mind. You talk about Mariana finding her voice. You and I both know it's very, very hard to speak with if you are a high school student. It's very hard to command respect amongst your fellow high school students because everybody's seen as basically equal. But I want to ask, from a coach's perspective, obviously leaders are called to lead, but I want to ask, how do you kind of sort of turn a student towards that direction where you go, I see some intangibles here with you, and I know that you can be a leader. So how do you kind of get that player into that direction? Is it putting them into a role where they're shown that they can lead? Is it putting them into a situation where you kind of see where their mentality is? I'm just curious, how do you kind of help these kids answer the call inside themselves if they are a leader? I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And I would say, it's probably different for some coaches than what I do, but every kid wants to be a captain. Mm-hmm. It's a very weird thing where they want the title. And for me, I don't like it. And we name them because we pretty much have to, but otherwise I wouldn't do it. And what I try to tell everybody is every kid from 1 to 10 on the varsity needs to be a leader. And they're going to have different opportunities to lead. It's just going to depend on when that opportunity comes, what it is, and how they react to it. So some kids have intangibles, but they still have to be taught how to actually do the leading. And so we focused on that. I meet with those captains, and the captains understand too that it becomes more responsibility than it is the hey, I get to have a C next to my name.
Right.
It's a lot of responsibility. And one of the things we talked about was that we need to include every person on the team in these types of training. So Saturday after practice, we actually started it, where I had the JV and the varsity team together, and we started on that process. So on Saturdays, we do some classroom work, and it's not just all in the gym. And that's where we start to really work on what it takes to be a leader, how you're going to get there. I'm going to provide opportunities for you to do it. How you handle it will show where you need to grow and what you already do well. We have this idea of what leaders are, and a lot of kids do, especially girls. They have this idea of what a leader is, and it's very rarely the correct idea. They think it's the kid who's really talented and talks the most.
No.
And it's not necessarily the case. if you're really talented, it gives you a leg up because everybody's going to respect you a little bit automatically, but that doesn't help you if you can't do the other parts of it. So really teaching them, I think, is the biggest thing. And every year we talk about it, and I have juniors and sophomores, truthfully, every year that are like, man, I want that. I want to be that person. So what's it going to take? And a lot of times it's a simple question where I'll say, why do you want this? And, why do you want to do it? And how they answer me tells me quite a bit. And I'll let them know. I mean, I always give feedback, so I'll let them know and be like, well, it's not the answer. And, let me give you some ideas of where we need to go from here, or that's perfect answer. And it's different for each kid.
Yeah.
It's not like a set rule of this is how you need to answer this question. Each kid would be having a different answer based on what I know about them. And some of them answer it great, and some of them struggle at first. And I tell them, go back to the drawing board and start to think about it. And Mariana was one of them, truthfully. Her first time when she said it to me, I said, no, you need to go think about this. Okay. And then she came back with a much better answer. And I would say that, our junior class too is made up of a lot of leaders automatically, just by the way they carry themselves. And out of our sophomore class, Michaela Martinez, who's also a varsity volleyball player, is someone who absolutely could be a fantastic leader going forward with the way she carries herself and some of the skills that she already has.
Well, that's awesome, Coach. It seems like your team is littered with genuinely just a bunch of leaders. I mean, you talk about that strong junior class. Obviously, they're going to be your seniors next year. You've got a handful of the seniors, kind of sprinkling in from that last year's team. And you mentioned building that culture, and it starts with defining those roles and filtering out the top from the bottom. And like you said, a leader isn't necessarily the person scoring the most points a game or the one who's, the best with the basketball or the best in whatever, or your particular favorite player. I mean, right. Like I mentioned, leading people are called to lead, and some can answer and some can't. Some just want the title and some genuinely do want the responsibility. But again, we are speaking with Mingus Union High School girls basketball coach Paul Ventura. Coach, I got one last question before we take off. November 30th, first basketball game of the season against Yunker. How are you feeling in that game against the Rough Riders?
We didn't play them last year, but we've played them in the past. We played them the 2 years prior to that. They seem to change year to year quite a bit, and I don't know if it's the same coach or not. The last time we played them, they were up-tempo. They like to put some pressure. And then they just ran like a pick and roll offense, and they had one really talented player. I'm going to look at some film before we get to that point to see what they did last year. But I could tell you what I've been telling our players is the focus is on us. Mm-hmm. If we control what we do and we do it really well, we're going to control the game, and it won't matter who the opponent is. And we just need to go out and impose our will on the other team from the beginning whistle to the very last horn. And if we can do that, we're going to win a lot of basketball games. We might come up against a team that's just more talented than us, but if we play our best and they beat us, then they're going to get a handshake and congratulations, and we'll move on to the next game. We can't lose games because we beat ourselves. And I think we're going to have a lot more talent and intensity than some other teams this year. And I think if we go out there and we play that way, they're going to be very surprised, and it's going to feel like really difficult 32 minutes of 90 feet of basketball and controlling the tempo. Truthfully.
Well, we are very excited for the start of the season. Again, the Marauders take on the Yunker Rough Riders on November 30th. Coach Paul Ventura, thank you for coming on and speaking about this program. We are excited to see what the Mingus Union girls basketball team does this year. Sounds like it is going to be very exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk with Mingus Union cross-country coach Sierra Tibbs right here on Off the Bench. Stay with us.
Two things we can count on every year.
A new set of tax rules and great weather here in northern Arizona.
Jackson Hewitt Tax Service, locally owned and operated by Lewis Rice since 1997, is here for you all year long.
Your neighborhood Jackson Hewitt Tax Office will help you in all of your taxing situations.
Electronic filing is always free with your tax preparation at Jackson Hewitt Tax Service.
Get more in return. Call 1-800-234-1040 for an office near you.
Welcome back to Off the Bench, Northern Arizona Prep Sports, presented by Gettles High Desert Mechanical and Cottonwood Parks and Recreation. I am joined now by Mingus Union High School cross-country coach Sierra Tibbs. Coach Tibbs, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Well, we are very happy to have you. The Marauders cross-country season has officially wrapped. They wrapped up their state competition on November 13th. Junior Cesar Diaz, I know a guy that I'm sure we mentioned the last time we spoke, who was one of your best runners, got the opportunity to compete at state for you in the men's 5,000 meter event. Let's talk about it, Coach. How did he perform at state, and how did the season go?
Yeah, so he was pretty dominant right from the get-go. We knew that coming out from track last year. And so we had high hopes for him just from the beginning of the season. He actually had some goals that he wanted to set early on. We have a long-time runner, Ferrerix, who has had the record for Mingus, or one of the records for 3 miles. I think it was like a 15:07. So that had been Caesar's goal from the beginning. His best was 15:28, I believe. And so he was close. But his second best, or his second goal, was to get to state. And so he definitely got to state and dominated at state. So he definitely crushed that goal and dream as well. So even if he didn't get his 15:07, he still made it to state and did very well.
Yeah, very much made his impact felt. And it provides a little bit of a jumping off point for the program in general to say, okay, well, this year we only had one, but next year we're going to try to get everyone or at least, a few more kids to compete at state. What about the season as in whole, Coach? I mean, it was your first year coaching the program. How did you feel the season went?
Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed coaching, and it was definitely a challenge for me being new, but I felt like a very strong connection to the team, and they responded well to some of the new things I threw at them for practices, incorporating some things that I have learned and really enjoyed as a runner and thought of as effective. And so they definitely responded well. Again, it was a learning curve. So there are some things that I definitely will change moving into next year. But that's okay. That's life, right?
Yeah, of course. Actually, Coach, I was going to save that for a little bit later, just kind of how, what goals you were able to accomplish. But since you mentioned you yourself as a coach, I do want to ask, how did you grow as a coach in your first year? You talk about some of those challenges you went through. Just, kind of specifically, how did you really grow as a coach? What did you learn? Where did you fail? Where did you succeed? Just what would you give you if you were to give an evaluation? How would it go?
Yeah. So definitely like behind the scenes stuff, being a head coach, there's a lot of logistics and stuff that I'm just not familiar with, and being out of the school, working a different job was kind of hard. Making sure my two separate lives were like combined at times. But overall, I think that I really want to focus on less of meets, like the packed in meets. I kind of want to give the runners a little bit more spaced out races throughout the week and just not packing them in. I think that would be beneficial for a lot of runners and just not having so many meets and just more practices and longer runs. And that's just kind of the outline plan that I would like to incorporate. I don't know exactly how that's going to happen. But just, kind of work it as more of like the college feel rather than pack it all in high school kind of.
Okay.
Feel.
Well, as we all know, practice makes perfect. So, having a few more practices as opposed to a few more meets is always great. Kind of looking at some of the players, I got a chance to skim through some of the statistics. And there were some players I specifically pointed out two on the girls' side. Obviously, Caesar was your standout on the boys, and not to say that anyone else didn't do well, but there were two players that kind of jumped out to me. Senior Aubrey Peterson, she set a few season records this year, along with junior McKenna Bliss. Also, she set some personal records. Of course, those two didn't get a chance to compete at the state level. But I mean, Coach, how does it feel for you to see, these two players have already been competing in cross country, but I mean, how does it feel to see them just improve their times, continue to improve as runners? Obviously, Aubrey's going to graduate after this year, but you'll get McKenna back. I mean, how does that make you feel going forward? Just seeing the improvement throughout the season with some of these kids.
Yeah, so Aubrey has had a great season. She was kind of in the background at the beginning, but she definitely started to pop the last when we started to hit phase 3 of our training. The last couple weeks of practices, she was close to first, leading some of those practices, and it was really cool to see her just kind of catch on to the race and understand the full process, and adding in more speed there. And she set a lot of season records. So we were very, very proud of her. And then her twin sister definitely was on her trail, trying to keep up with her as well. And then, McKenna, she's awesome. She's solid. We saw her kind of have a really good season last year in track, running in the 2 miles. She ran a couple races and won a couple races. And so, it was a great thing. She's definitely more dominant in some of those shorter distances. She still is pretty awesome in the 3 miles, but we definitely have a lot of room to improve with her. They did actually compete. The girls team did make it to state. They were fourth in sectional. Sorry, I don't know if you knew that. They were fourth in sectional. No, it's okay. And Maisie Babcock was our number 2 runner, and she actually placed 16th and medaled at state. So pretty impressive for the girls' side as well.
Yes, very much so. And I do apologize. I guess I was only looking really on one side of the aisle here, but you're right. Yeah, both programs having some success at state. And that's great to hear. Very happy about that, Coach. Let's talk in general. Anybody who surprised you? Who would your most improved runner be? Was there any new time runners that really kind of just stood out to you? Just who else was competing really well this year?
Yeah, so we actually have a couple freshmen on both boys and girls sides. We have the sibling of McKenna Bliss, Ainsley Bliss. She's a little freshman. We have Hannah Sweeney. She was our number 4 runner for the girls. So she actually competed in state as well. So they were actually very impressive. It was fun to kind of bring them in from that middle school level into the high school level. And they're young runners. So it's exciting to kind of mold them and see where they fit into our top 7. And then we had Addie Maddox as a freshman as well. And these are incredible freshmen, and they will be great additions to the team. As long with the boys side, we had Nico and then Liam Leto. There are some freshmen that joined us that'll be pretty solid once they kind of get their running form down and some more miles under their belt. But we do have some potential. I think most improved, I would have to say Avery Whiteset or Derek Light. Those two, they are just our solid 7. I'd love to see the boys kind of pack closer together next year. And I would love to see their team go to state. I know it's a Caesar show, but we definitely want, the Mingus boys to have a say and be in that spotlight at some point as well. So.
Yes, it very much currently is the Caesar show on the boys' side, and you will get that junior runner back for his senior year next season. Again, we are speaking with Mingus Union High School cross country coach Sierra Tibbs. The Marauders have wrapped up their cross country season. They finished up their state competition on November 13th. Coach, kind of going forward, what plans do you have for the program? What goals would you like to reach now that we enter into the off season?
I would love to see. Again, both teams make it to state. I think that is a great end goal. And again, on the girls' side, the reason we made it to state was just their ability to pack together and kind of create that opportunity for them to cut down our score and make it to state.
What do you mean by pack together, Coach? You mentioned that term a couple of times. Just out of curiosity, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so in cross country, like golf, the lowest score wins, or the lowest score usually comes out on top. And so as a coach, we want to see our athletes, our top 7 or more, really stick together and be up in the top. But even if they pack together and basically run with each other like we do in practice all the time, together, it cuts down other teams' abilities to be in that lineup. So we would rather see all red really close together, and that cuts down our score pretty well. So.
Right. So you're essentially, I mean, like you just said, you're essentially getting a group of Marauder runners finishing in places 1 through 10, as opposed to 1 in first, 1 in 12th, 1 in 22nd. I get what you're saying a lot more now. But like I mentioned, Coach, I wasn't sure if you're able to finish your point, but just like I mentioned, goals for the program going forward. I kind of interrupted you in the middle of that answer, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to just continue with your point.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, I'd like to definitely close those gaps between the runners and see if we can just work as a team more so individually. I know a lot of them are very track minded and individual minded, but cross country is an all around team sport. And so everyone has a place, everyone has a purpose, and getting everyone to work together is basically the main goal for me, at least, and then getting them to their goals as well.
Well, now that the off season's officially underway, Coach, you're also preparing for the track and field season. You're a part of the coaching staff for that program as well. How much are you thinking about cross country throughout the track and field season? I mean, how does the off season operate for cross country? What did you tell your runners at the end of the season?
Yeah, so we definitely want them to take a break. Running miles upon miles for 3 to 4 months straight is a lot. And so we definitely saw some injuries come out towards the last couple of weeks of practice, unfortunately. So definitely take off some weeks. And this weather's great out here, so you can basically run all through February, which I'm not used to being from the Midwest. But yeah, we'll definitely get back into running mid-January, probably early January, get some miles back under your belt, ready for track season. And then ultimately after track, get ready for cross season.
Will we see any crossover with any cross-country players going over and participating in track and field?
Absolutely. A lot of our runners are both dual sports. And so a lot of them are the distance team, make up the distance team for track that come out for cross country.
Well, very exciting, Coach. Like I mentioned, the off season underway for cross country. You're getting ready for the track and field season. Do you have to kind of decipher a little bit mentally and go into track and field mode, or are you pretty much switched over, ready to go?
I'm not. I love cross country. That's where my heart is. And so, yeah, it definitely will take a little bit for me to kind of get more in that speed and even help the kids understand that you still need endurance to run track. It's not all speed work. And you still need those longer muscle groups to still run, especially for the distance kids. They still need to have some miles under the belt. So in a way, I still have that cross country hold, but I will be able to transition to track probably after the holidays.
She is Mingus Union High School cross country head coach, Sierra Tibbs. Coach Tibbs, thank you very much for coming back to the show to give us an update on the season. Congratulations on completing your first year. We look forward to speaking with you again when we get close to track and field, or honestly, when we get close to cross country for sure.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
That's going to do it for this episode of Off the Bench. I'd like to thank my guests, Mingus Union girls basketball coach Paul Ventura, Prescott girls soccer coach Paul Campuzano, and of course, breaking up the Pauls is Mingus Union High School cross country coach Sierra Tibbs. That is this episode of Off the Bench. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo, wishing you a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time.